This historic day. Thank you so much for joining us now for this Fox 11 live local coverage. I'm Alex Michelson.
I'm Roxy Carpanian.
And I'm Sandra Endo. There you heard it. Donald Trump pleading not guilty to 34 felony counts that were unsealed during this arraignment, much of it stemming from whether or not he violated federal election laws regarding those payments to porn star Stormy Daniels as well as Karen McDougal.
Karen McDougal, who was a Playboy model who Donald Trump may or may not have had an affair with. She said that they did. Was paid by the National Enquirer to keep her story quiet. It's a practice called catch and kill, which essentially we pay you so that we have the rights to your story without ever wanting to actually broadcast that story. But then because we own the rights to it, nobody else can have it. There are reports that this is something that Donald Trump and the head of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, had done together over the years to stop some potentially negative stories, and that is the potential allegation of what happened with Karen McDougal. So we still have not officially seen this indictment yet. We do expect that to come out at any moment. We do expect the former president to leave the courtroom potentially at any moment. We do believe, though, that this hearing is still underway right now.
And at that time, we will also hear from the district attorney who's scheduled to speak with reporters following this arraignment. What you're looking at, by the way, on your screen, the smaller corner there on the far left, top left, is the shot that media is allowed to get from inside of the hallway there where you see security standing. That is the door leading into the courtroom. Obviously, on your right, you see the image of Donald Trump. Very few photographers were allowed inside, still photographers, to capture these pictures prior to the arraignment beginning. Also, just reading here, one of the Trump aides, in speaking with a reporter, described this moment as the least amount of control Trump has had over a situation and his physical circumstances in many years. I have to imagine the weight of this moment is hitting him, which is much of how we would say we analyze that picture on your right.
It sounds a lot like what we've been saying for the last few hours as well. Donald Trump, who is so often in control of his own situation, his own reality, somebody who has willed his way to being one of the most prominent business leaders in New York, to being a worldwide celebrity with a hugely popular TV show, a person who was such a marketing genius that he was able to turn his name into a brand on so many different levels, and then will his way as somebody who had never run for office before and became the president of the United States and the commander-in-chief while simultaneously in the same election cycle beating the Bush families and the Clinton families. That Donald Trump is not used to this sort of scenario where somebody else is in charge and able to tell him no, essentially. And you know, he hasn't basically been secondary to anybody in his life since his father used to run the Trump organization, and that was a long time ago.
And we don't know at this point, after these proceedings wrap up, whether or not the former president will address the media. It was something that was talked about earlier in the day, that he did have a desire to address reporters and the cameras, obviously, like he likes to control his narrative, as Alex was saying, and really paint his picture in perspective in terms of what he's thinking and feeling about all this and the case against him. But it's unclear whether or not there'll be a gag order after this, or whether or not the president just saves it, because there is a rally scheduled for later this evening at Mar-a-Lago, and that is where the former president will be addressing his supporters. He has managed to spin this and use it as a political advantage because in light of all this, the indictment, he has already raked in $8 million for his political campaign, his election in the 2024 race for the presidency. So clearly this is something that they want to capitalize on as well, turn any negative into a positive. So maybe he does save a lot of his remarks for the Florida rally, where he can really rile up his supporters and gain more support in terms of what he's trying to do come next year.
Well, and to that point, I mean, his campaign has literally put out a fundraising email with a fake picture of a fake mugshot with a fake height for Donald Trump that they are now using to raise money and trying to sell to supporters to wear a picture of him on a T-shirt in a mugshot that didn't actually happen.
For $47, you get a T-shirt.
For $47, hopefully that helps him to become the 47th president. So that they clearly view this as a political win. You know, the question is, does Donald Trump view this as a personal loss as he's actually having to sit there and do it? It's one thing to talk about it theoretically. It's another thing to actually be sitting in that courtroom and have the reality of that moment hit him. And that's what it appears to be from this picture. Whether that stays that way the rest of the day, whether that version of Donald Trump is what we see later tonight at Mar-a-Lago, hard to imagine that that stays that way all day.
Speaking of Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach police are ramping up security there. The sheriff's office is installing bike racks along a portion of the road leading to Mar-a-Lago ahead of Trump's arrival, returning from New York. He is expected to deliver those remarks there at his resort at about 8:15 tonight. They haven't gone into detail about the specific security measures, but they're just waiting for him to depart, and they will have much tighter security around the resort as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mar-a-Lago is pretty easy to secure. I mean, it's a private club with very clear entrances and exits. It's the place where, you know, the Secret Service can basically keep track of every person that comes in and out, versus like a public street in the biggest city in the world where lots of people are coming in and out. In Manhattan is much, much more complicated.
And speaking of the political context of all this, the White House did have a press briefing, and the press secretary was asked how President Biden is taking this, and is he focused on it or listening in or paying attention to it? And according to the press secretary, she says that President Biden is not focused on former President Trump's surrender and arraignment. And he may catch parts of it on television, though, but he is focused on the American people. So that's coming out of the White House in terms of this significant day in history. But clearly, yeah, kind of, you know, keeping an arm distance away from the things that are playing out in Lower Manhattan.
Not surprising either. You know, Joe Biden has tried to stay away from this. When he's been asked about it, he said no comment. They view it as, you know, politically expedient to try to stay away from this potential prosecution, something that they really don't have anything to do with. You know, and my guess is that the president, like some other officials, would also like to, you know, read the indictment before maybe making some statements about it as well. That hasn't stopped some on the left and the right who have, you know, over-the-top analysis of an indictment that they haven't actually seen yet. So it'll be interesting to see. Within, we expect, the next 20 minutes or so, Alvin Bragg, the DA for Manhattan, is expected to give a press briefing once this wraps up. We expect that to be around 12:30 or so to lay out his case.
Yeah, the interesting point you made, Alex, before was that even his Republican political opponents rallying alongside the former president in terms of really denouncing this case and the indictment itself. So how this all plays out politically has been very interesting. The former president capitalizing on this, but as well as his Republican opponents then supporting him as well.
Well, and this particular case is very easy for Republicans to be frustrated by. You've got a partisan, you know, New York City DA who is very liberal, who is very anti-Trump, who has talked about the idea of going after him before. You've got a case that the FEC kind of didn't prosecute, a case that the former New York DA didn't prosecute, that is now being prosecuted in the middle of a presidential campaign. And the issues are far less weighty issues than the idea of inciting an insurrection or trying to, overturn an election or things like that. I mean, this idea of maybe falsifying business records having to do with paying a porn star, even if you think that is illegal, is nowhere close to as serious as what potentially he could be charged for regarding Georgia or January 6th or even the Mar-a-Lago documents. And so this case, if you're a Republican, is very, very hard for you to stomach.
Where do the other cases stand from this point?
Well, we know that there are active investigations happening on all of them. We know that some of the president's close allies and opponents have been interviewed by various grand juries in all of them. And we know that there has been movement in all of them. But what we haven't seen is an actual indictment in any of them, which has been frustrating to a lot of folks on the left who essentially say, what are you waiting for, Merrick Garland? Where's the indictment on those? And the closer that it gets to the presidential campaign, the harder it may be politically to go forward with one of these indictments. There is some feeling by some people close to Trump that one of the reasons he decided to run again was it does make it harder to prosecute him. But clearly that didn't stop Alvin Bragg, and he's going forward with his case regardless of that.
And speaking of the time it takes for an investigation, this particular one that we're in front of right now, it took 5 years to bring this up and have it become what it's become today. So it doesn't happen overnight. Those other investigations can also take some time. And it could take some time in this instance as well to see how this plays out. There's still a question if could this go to trial? Will it go to trial? When would it go to trial? How would this impact the 2024 presidential run? A lot is definitely at stake, and we just have to be mindful of the short-term and the long-term implications.
Yeah, I mean, and anybody that's had any experience with our criminal court system here in LA knows, and it's certainly similar in New York, like the system is way overloaded. And there aren't enough courts, and there aren't enough judges, and there aren't enough jurors, and everything takes way too long because the system is so backed up, and the pandemic didn't help that process either. And so a case like this, it could be a year or more until it's actually heard. And one of the tactics that Donald Trump's legal teams, and there have been many legal teams over the years with one of the more litigious people in New York, has used over the years is to delay, push things back. And that has been a strategy that they've used, and that may be a strategy that they use with this case as well. It's one thing to have the headline and to have the fake mugshot that you're selling. It's another thing to actually, potentially face the real consequence of spending time behind bars.
And you're taking a live look inside that Manhattan criminal courthouse, and where you see the security on the right of your screen, those are the doors where behind them is the proceeding taking place. Now, earlier when the former president made his way from Trump Tower down to Lower Manhattan, Alex, you were saying that we saw the image of him raising his fist up to supporters, kind of greeting them. And now you see up in the upper left-hand corner a still picture of the former president inside the courtroom before the official arraignment began. But I am looking at some video of him arriving at the courthouse. We couldn't get a very up-close look at the vantage point we're looking at, but he did get out of his motorcade and waved to supporters as he entered the courthouse. But again, as he entered the courtroom, a very different look on the president's face, a very somber look. The one you're looking at right there in that still picture says it all. So clearly beforehand, a very different Donald Trump as he emerged from Trump Tower right there. There's video, him waving as well as raising a fist. And then he made his way down to Lower Manhattan, where when he entered the courthouse, again, the same mood, addressing supporters, waving to them, but not addressing anybody, waving or even smiling, I would say, when he entered that courtroom, right, Alex? You were
Right.
kind of, you know, in shock in terms of his demeanor as he entered that courtroom, very somber, a very wow moment in political history.
It really was. And it's a moment that people will view very differently depending on their perspective. If you are a Democrat who has been anti-Trump from the start and view him as somebody who has lied his way to the White House, never faced any consequences for anything he's ever done, and you got excited about the Mueller case, which turned out to not have a satisfying conclusion. You got excited about January 6th, and then he ended up, you know, being acquitted in the Senate after that, and you felt like this guy needs to face some consequences for something. You are celebrating this image because you feel like finally somebody is holding him accountable for something. Even if it isn't the case I wanted, he's being held accountable for something. And if you're a Republican and you feel like they throw everything to get this guy, they tried it with Russia, and that was nothing. They tried it with after January 6th to bring him down, and they weren't able to bring him down. They try it on thing after thing, and now they're doing hush money payments to a porn star, this random case to try to bring him down and try to get that picture. I hope you're all happy now. You know, this is an abomination, and by the way, we want to now try your politicians when they're out. And so that, I think, is the way that different people are seeing this. And there are also probably some people in the middle that are kind of like, I don't know about, you know, having a president be indicted and for this, and I want to know a little more about this, but maybe this makes me feel a little uncomfortable seeing an image like that and what that means for American history. I mean, rarely have we seen when one party has done something that the other party doesn't react in some way as well. And so this could be a new sort of moment. But that's why what I said earlier, I do believe in, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, you should see this as a sad day for the presidency itself, and a sad day for our democracy, which needs, in some ways, for people to believe in the concept of democracy and both sides to, at the end of the day, agree that an election was fair, shake hands, and try to work together to make the country better.
Well, that's what's made America, America, right? No matter what has happened, the ability to do that, we've stood out in the world.
And he didn't do that after the last election. And that hasn't been taken into account, some people would say. But he was the first president to essentially not do that in our country's history.
So we're an hour in when proceedings began, which I'm thinking things should be wrapping up.
Yeah, those quick
soon.
Proceedings aren't so quick.
Right. Nothing ever is. But at this point, since he has entered the not guilty plea to 34 felony counts, that's the highlight of it all. So just keep waiting to see when that door is going to open. And our assumption is, based on how the barricades were reconfigured, he is going to take a right, and go through those doors, unless he decides to stand there and say something. But it also depends on whether or not that judge issues the gag order.
Yeah, and those are the logistical housekeeping things, the procedural things they're probably discussing right now with both the legal team and the judge, whether or not there is a gag order imposed in this. The judge obviously very serious about this and not allowing cameras in the courtroom and making this a spectacle. Obviously, there is no choice. It is what it is. But also, his legal team probably arguing, too, that they want to change a venue. And that's something the former president even issued a statement about on his Truth Social earlier today as well. So these are all kind of the logistical housekeeping things that they would talk about after the counts are read and the plea is entered. Then it's the calendar as well. So all of the court proceedings that have to kind of get hammered out in terms of being in front of a judge and trying to figure out all the parts of this. So we'll see what happens in terms of those two big things, the gag order and the change of venue. It doesn't seem likely, though, for the change of venue to happen. The Trump's team wanting to change it to Staten Island, where there's a more conservative Republican base. But clearly this is happening in Manhattan, and the Manhattan DA really taking the lead on this. And so we'll see what they decide as they emerge from this courtroom, which should be hopefully sometime soon.